Okay, so that's interesting. So, and I'm glad you brought that up because it sort of anticipates. I was going to ask you, I know a lot of critics of Bitcoin, particularly those coming from a climate change perspective, are going to say, oh, look at this is crazy that these so-called mining operations are it's computers running through all kinds of calculations in order to mine the next block on the blockchain. And it uses a lot of electricity. And it's sort of like an arms race that just as more and more mining rigs enter the system, that just like increases the difficulty of the problems they have to solve. And so it's sort of just each all these different things using more and more electricity. It's it's not advancing humanity or anything. It's sort of like a counterproductive thing, and it causes all these emissions for CO2 and whatnot. And so, if I'm understanding, you're saying by monetizing it, like you're actually giving a financial incentive for people to develop better ways to create electricity, in particular ways that don't happen to emit CO2.
hmm I think
Okay.
so.
Do you have it? It's fine if you don't. I'm just wondering, like, do you have? Because I know some people too. They say like, oh yeah, we prefer like proof of stake over proof of work, and that there is a sense in which it does seem like a big arms race. And isn't there a way we could somehow retain the benefits of what Satoshi gave us with Bitcoin, but without all this seemingly wasteful use of electricity?
No, because you have proof of stake already. That's the Federal Reserve or any central bank. That you have that system ready.
Mhm.
Ethereum just made it into a blockchain and profited off of it. But that system has existed from the dawn of time. It's basically people taking control of a money supply, being able to manage it and to manipulate it. And we've had that already. Proof of work requires an energy input. It requires real resources, real effort, and that cannot be faked. And that is the whole point. But in general, we need better critics because the critics of Bitcoin on the dimension of energy are very weak. It's always like it uses too much energy. But the question really is, what is too much energy? It's just too much energy because you think so? Or do you have a mathematical, quantifiable model for how much energy Bitcoin should use? And the answer is usually no. And also, most environmental critics never talk about methane, which to me just makes me dismiss them outright because they only talk about carbon. But Bitcoin is a massive environmental technology that protects the environment because we can also remove massive amounts of methane emissions through mining. So the fact that they cannot get over this mental hurdle to look at what is factually being done just shows me that we need far better critics than are available.
That's true in many areas, I think. So what about those, someone, again, not like a hostile critic, but just somebody who loves Bitcoin, but says, isn't there an issue with the transaction limit? And how could Bitcoin function as like the day-to-day money in a certain country, given the transaction limit? So I think I know what you've talked about, but just for our listeners, so how do you address that?
Right. So the energy that Bitcoin uses is to maintain the base layer, the Bitcoin chain. But above that, we can have layer two solutions like Liquid, which is a Bitcoin sidechain, or like Lightning, which is basically Bitcoin transactions without a blockchain. So not everyone has to maintain a copy of every transaction, which is the base layer. And these two technologies allow Bitcoin to scale to planetary levels. So countries can use Bitcoin as a payment method. They can pay with Liquid, with Lightning, or just use Liquid to rebalance Lightning channels. This might be over the top for some of your readers, but basically you need the integrity of the base level, or not readers, viewers. You need the integrity of the base level. And then you can do other things that have trade-offs in trust. So Liquid has trade-offs. It's not as decentralized and as mutable as Bitcoin. Lightning also has trade-offs too. It's not as stable, but you gain throughput. So as long as you have the foundation that's solid, you can build a skyscraper on top of it. It's really crazy to think that people still believe that in this day that Bitcoin transactions are limited because it hasn't been the case for the last 7-8 years.
Okay, great. So again, just like for example, the Lightning. Is this a useful analogy to think about it? That like you can imagine gold bars. Like if a country used gold as its money, you could have gold bars sitting in vaults somewhere, and then people, when they go to buy a cup of coffee, might hand over like a piece of paper that is a claim on a fraction of the gold bar somewhere. And so it's not that people are walking around with backpacks full of solid gold and in exchange and having to shave off a little bit to give to the guy to get a cup of coffee. And yet the gold itself still would be the underlying base money in that little hypothetical world. Is that a way of thinking about how Bitcoin could work when you're talking about like layer one versus layer two?
Definitely. I would say, that's basically what you just described the origin of fiat money, right? It's just a IOU on a gold bar in a vault. And that's because gold is defective. It's too heavy and it cannot really scale for payments, right? You can't bring a truckload of gold bars easily somewhere, right? Or even move it across the ocean. That's very expensive. So that's why it ends up in the vaults and you have paper claims on that, which you can use as a gold layer two. But as we've seen through history and lessons, that doesn't work because anytime someone has control of the base layer, the second layers become affected or degraded. So in case of gold, it could be not there. Maybe it's not in the vault anymore. Maybe the guy sold it or the gold is lead. You just have no way to verify. So this is why Bitcoin is so transformative, because those gold bars in the vault are in your own personal vault in your head. And you can verify it on your own without having to melt the gold down. You just run the Bitcoin software and you're done. And this is why Bitcoin is so amazing, because it solved that problem for old money, which is gold and fiat as a layer one and layer two.
Okay, yeah, great. So you're explaining why, in your view, Bitcoin is a better money for the computer age than even gold was. But I'm just saying, as far as like, what do we mean when we talk layer one and layer two, and that they're again, so the Lightning, like in other words, how can it be that Lightning allows for transactions that aren't settled on the ultimate blockchain? Is it because, in a sense, is it the
No,
right
they
way to
still
think
settle.
about it, that it's claims on
No,
Bitcoins? Or okay,
everything still settles, and it
okay.
settles cryptographically. So you have the assurance that it goes back down to the base layer at the end of the day. Any layer two will still settle on Bitcoin, whether it's Liquid or Lightning. It still needs to make transactions on the base chain.
Hey, everybody, this is Bob Murphy. Thanks for listening to this clip from the InFi podcast. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please consider subscribing and share this video with others. We've got new episodes dropping every Friday with more insightful discussions. Stay tuned.